So yeah, good evening. It's lovely to be here. My name's Miriam. This is the very first ISTR Zoom series from this year, 2023. We're on to 2024. And of the first series, this is the very first seminar. So it's absolutely lovely and delighted to be here with you and to have it on a topic as exciting and cool as the PQ. And what I want to do actually is firstly thank a colleague in absentia, Dr. Barry Houlihan. He's kind of organising and curating this event, but he couldn't be with us tonight, but he was working with Siobhán and Niall and Liam and other people in the background to make sure it all got organised and up and running. So shout out to Barry. And if this gets you thinking, you'd like to hear another seminar of some kind, artists, academics, whoever, by all means, give us a shout. You can email info@istr.ie, or you can email Barry directly. He'll be delighted to put out his details here at barry.houlihan@universityofgalway.ie, and we'll find a place to slot that in and get that organised, because we'd love to do it. And it's just nice to kind of meet up and chat about interesting things. So to get us going, I might then just introduce everyone. Is it okay if I begin by introducing Liam? Can Liam give me a wave if he is here?
Liam, are you here?
No. I'll tell you what, Siobhán, I can introduce you first then.
Okay.
And then Niall, and then I'll come back to Liam.
Yeah.
So a part of our panel this evening is Dr. Siobhán O'Gorman, who lectures in visual culture at the Institute of Art, Design and Technology, Dún Laoghaire, Dublin. And she's currently head of department for design and visual arts. Well done, Siobhán. Didn't know you were head of department. Sort of well done commiserations, as they say. She is on the executive committee of the Irish Society for Theatre Research, the editorial board of studies in costume and performance, and she's part of the curatorial team for Ireland's participation in the Prague Quadrennial in 2015. She's published widely on theatre, performance and design and has co-edited several volumes on these areas. More recently, in 2021, she co-edited a themed issue of Rise, which is the review of Irish studies in Europe on connections between Irish and European culture at the Dublin Gate Theatre, and a special double issue of the journal Scene on performance in Ireland. And she'd co-editors on both those as well. And she is still trying to finish the book Theatre, Performance and Design for Palgrave, but it will be worth the wait. So Siobhán, if you want to do a little Queen's wave there so everyone can be in no doubt who you are. That's great. And just as we go along, guys, if you want to chat, you can put up the hand virtually or pop it into the chat box. Or if you're up for it, you can just butt in, whatever, we're grand with it. So I'll move over now to Dr. Niall Rea. So Belfast-born, always very important, Belfast-born Niall received his doctorate from the Brownfield Centre for Theatre Research at Queen's University. As a designer, Niall has worked extensively all over the UK and Ireland, as well as in the Netherlands and in the USA, working as set, costume and lighting designer on over 200 theatre, opera and dance productions. Thank you very much. He is artistic director of Ireland's first publicly funded queer theatre company, Theatre of Pluck, and he's published in academic volumes on queer theory and Northern Irish identity. He is lecturer in theatre design and creative practice at the Atlantic Technological University, Sligo. So Niall, could we have a little wave from yourself so everyone can be in no doubt? There we go. And Liam, it's lovely to meet you. I see you there. You're just in time for your big intro now, so hold on. Liam is a theatre designer and teacher. He currently works at IADT, where he lectures in production design. He's also worked as a designer in the UK for many years, making work with a wide range of touring and building-based companies. In Ireland, he's designed for the Abbey, the Project, the Gaiety and the Cork Everyman, often with Conal Morrison in the director's chair. He's currently designing again with Conal for a new work by Colin Murphy. Liam co-founded the Irish Society of Stage and Screen Designers and was chairperson during its first participation at the Prague Quadrennial, curated by Joe Mangan. He's published essays on American designers, Joe Mielziner, I can't say that well, and Morris Sendak, and on British theatre design for Shakespeare in the 1960s. He's still working towards a large study of the life and work of Sean Kenny, one of the most significant theatre designers of the 1960s. There's no need for these still working on qualifying your projects. That just means you're doing it properly and in depth. I'm sure you all heard my email there, so that's a reminder to me to get rid of that. On that note, Siobhán, can I hand over to you? And you might kick us off and just explain the PQ to us, the Irish contribution, your role, and the sorts of nuts and bolts of things we might discuss this evening.
Okay, great. Thanks, Miriam. Delighted to be here and delighted to kick off the first in what we hope will be a very fruitful series of webinars. I was about to say online seminar, which doesn't make any sense. Webinars for the Irish Society for Theatre Research, which I've been part of for a really long time. And I'm currently on the exec of, and I have been for a really long time on the exec as well. But it's just lovely to, as you know, as Miriam mentioned earlier, to kind of take what we learned in the pandemic and put it to good use so that we have these resources for people. So my particular research area is scenography. That the book that I'm still finishing is yeah, I mean, it's just a bit slow with moving around and stuff, but that initially came out of a postdoc that I did at Trinity, which was researching the history of Irish design using a lot of different archives. When I finished up that postdoc, I was also involved in the curation of the PQ in 2015 as part of the team there. And as part of that, we had a little documentary as well with a range of designers, including who had worked in Irish theatre, including Chris Bow and Liam Bell, and a range of others. That was a documentary that was played on a loop at that PQ. But to talk to us more about PQ, or the Prague Quadrennial, we've invited my esteemed colleague, Liam Doona. And first of all, we're going to go to Liam, who knows a lot about the history of PQ, the history of scenography. He's going to talk us through that. He himself has been involved in PQ in various capacities. Then we're going to move on to Niall, and Niall will talk specifically about the Irish student exhibit at PQ 2023. So PQ is every 4 years. So it kind of skipped the pandemic, which was quite handy because we had one in 2019 and then we had 2023. So we also had the main Irish exhibit in 2023, which was the next 4 years. So that was like a speculative retrospective of Irish design practice. So some of the students are here who were involved in the student exhibit Beyond the Barricades, which I'll talk to Niall about, and we're going to bring in the students as well to talk about that. Niall, do you want to introduce, before we kick off and I start to talk to Liam, do you want to introduce any students who were involved in the student exhibit at PQ 2023, which you curated?
I don't know. Would the students and my colleague Sinead like to introduce themselves? Some people don't have their cameras on, so I can't quite see who's here. I can see Lucy and Sinead. If you want to say hello.
Esme is there as well.
Is Esme? Oh, there's Em as well.
So
do you want to say hello, Sinead?
Hello. Yes, I'm here too. And my dog.
So Sinead was also involved in a curatorial capacity.
Yeah. Sinead came over with me from ATU Sligo as well, and was of enormous importance while we were there.
I exhibited with the IABT students in 2019, so sort of had experience of the whole of all the ins and outs of it. I'm on the PQ committee as well, so I just assisted Niall then with our 21 students. So it was great, really, really good. They were brilliant. They had a really good experience.
Yeah, they were fantastic. I can see Lucy there on the screen beside me from Queen's University Belfast.
Hi, yeah, I'm Lucy. I'm from Queen's and I just graduated there now in drama. So I know more about literature and that sort of thing, but we all just kind of molded together.
Fantastic. I can see Em.
Hello, I'm very sorry, I might not. Can everyone hear me?
Yeah.
I have my headphones on. I'm working at the minute. I'm actually working for a Dublin Theatre Festival right now, so very nice. But I'm a final year student in IDT. I study costume design, and yeah, I really enjoyed PQ. It was a wonderful, wonderful experience. So that's me.
Thanks, Em. Esme, do you want to say hello?
I'm just getting back in from work. Hi, I'm Esme. I am a Queen's University drama student who's just graduated. Going part of the student team, I think it's a great experience overall.
Okay, thanks, Esme. We'll come back to you later. Couldn't quite understand that, but we'll come back to you later. Is there anyone else from the student exhibit there Jane? Anna? Do you want to say hello?
Hi, I am horrendously sick right now, so I won't object anyone to my face. But yeah, I am a final year student as well in IDT, and I study character design. And yeah, it was very very eye-opening going over to Prague and seeing so much amazing work. It's really really influenced a lot of like my thinking now going forward with college. So very grateful for that.
And Anna?
Yeah, I'm Anna. I'm a third year art student, also in IDT. I found Prague really interesting, especially because I'm not in a theatre design course and I'd be more focused on art. So it was really interesting. It was really eye-opening, I think. It opened a whole new world for me. So that was really cool. I'm really grateful for that opportunity.
Grand. Thanks. Is that everyone from this student?
Is Dylan there? Is Dylan, are you there, Dylan? Because Dylan promised me he was coming. No. Okay, well, we'll just go on. Maybe Dylan will join at some point. So thanks, students, for coming.
Okay, thanks.
As you can see or hear, we had students from all over the islands, and I'll talk about that later.
Yeah. So we just wanted to get the students to say hello in the first instance. And we'll come back to you later on to talk maybe a little bit more once we've kind of had some further framing around PQ. So first of all, to talk to us about that, I'm going to go to Liam Doona, who works with me in IDT. So Liam.
Hi, everybody. What's my cue? Do you want some sort of background to PQ?
Yeah, just tell us a bit, because not everybody is familiar with PQ actually. I've worked in a range of different theatre departments, and sometimes they've never heard of it, would you believe? Which is shocking.
No, absolutely.
So,
Yeah,
so it's just to have a bit of history and context on PQ itself, and then maybe Ireland's relationship to it or your experience of it.
Yeah. Yes, well, I mean, when I first encountered it, I wasn't even sure what quadrennial meant, never mind what the exhibition was about. But it's I suppose, just to sort of put its history in a pot, it is essentially, it's a 4-yearly gathering, symposium, review, incitement around contemporary visual theatre practice. And it was founded by a Czech designer called František Trosta, who founded the DAMU Theatre Design Academy, actually in the late 1940s, I think. And František, in the middle of the 1960s, around 66, 67, organized a retrospective of Czech theatre design. And it was staged in Sao Paulo at the Biennale there, and attracted a lot of attention. And I think it was a moment when people began to see that the material that theatre designers communicate their thinking through isn't necessarily just kind of instrumental stuff that allows you to get the show on, but can actually, in some cases, almost kind of stand in and of itself and have merit kind of as an art object in and of itself. So Trosta and the team were really successful in 67, and on the back of that, they were able to persuade the Czech Arts Council, as it was, to develop this idea, and it became this kind of 4-yearly event in Prague, often at the Palace of Industry, but at other spaces as well. So it kind of grew out of a more kind of general arts biennale experience. It sort of it exploited the fact that Czech theatre in particular, and Eastern European theatre after the Second World War, just had this kind of creative renaissance. really extraordinary designers started to emerge. Troster himself, Svoboda, lots of others. So they kind of built on that, and very quickly, actually, it became a kind of key moment for global theatre practice. Although some countries, Ireland being an example, were perhaps slightly late to the party, given how long it's been going on. But nevertheless, had representation through other countries in the kind of intervening period. So it comes out of a biennial. It builds on the back of Czech theatre success, and there you are. That's where it came from.
That's great, Liam. So yeah, you mentioned that Ireland were somewhat late to the party. I mean, it's interesting, yeah, because it's this kind of these European exhibits, and I mean, there's kind of or world expositions, you know, there's a whole history of that, I guess. And in the Victorian era, Ireland would have been represented, but would have been represented as, you know, as a colony, I guess, of England. But, you know, it's can you think of any reasons why Ireland might have been late to the party, or what has been your experience?
Well, certainly one of the things that's true of countries who were in there much earlier was a kind of evolved arts council and support from an evolved arts council. And, you know, having said the Irish were late to the party, the British were pretty late too. You know, it was the mid-70s by the time the British got there. And that was on the back of a man called Peter Mayer becoming the chair of drama in the Arts Council at that point. And he was really instrumental. So it's expensive to get there. It's always been expensive to get there, and to take a kind of decent team over there. And, you know, you need some kind of infrastructure to make the thing possible. You need a professional organisation to make the thing possible. And in the case of, you know, our neighbours, the UK and ourselves, it took us a little while to do that. I think also there's also a question about the extent to which we really valued the materials through which we developed and communicated design outside of the context of the performance itself, and the extent to which those kind of design objects could kind of stand up and communicate the practice in an effective way. And actually Arnold, a very good writer, critic, thinker, Arnold Aronson, who writes about theatre a lot, he's really good on this, and he talks about, you know, the kind of fragmentary nature of working in the theatre, and this assemblage of lots of small parts which have come from lots of places, which kind of coalesce around the moment of performance. And I think for some countries, and possibly ourselves, there might have been some nervousness about the extent to which one could stand up the practice outside of the moment of performance and still have it read in a kind of interesting and legitimate way. And some of those Eastern European practices were frankly just much stronger at it. I mean, you kind of look at, you know, kind of Russian and Polish drawing in the 1960s and 70s, you know, drawing for theatre, and it's just breathtaking. It's just breathtaking. And I'm sure a lot of people just thought, I'm not quite sure we're quite there yet. It's also to do with the nature of theatre making in a country. And I think, you know, you kind of speak to, I know, colleagues in Germany or something who have these fantastically elongated development periods to make work, you know, while we were kind of turning it around in 3 weeks or something. You know, they'd have 6 months to kind of develop work and really churn the thing. So some countries and the practices that they supported were just more able to kind of put work into that space, I think. The other thing, oddly, that coincided with the British first doing it was the fact that the V&A decided to open a theatre museum, a museum of theatre, and suddenly there was a little kind of there was a bit of a spurt of interest around it, and all that kind of pushed the thing along.
Miriam actually has her hand up there. I think she'd like to come in.
Yeah, thanks. If you don't mind, that was so interesting, Liam. I was just wondering, see, since we've started going, or it's becoming a thing that Ireland sends off its PQ group or team, and since there's more a culture developing among general sort of theatre artists and people interested in the arts, that they might go to PQ, if nothing else, as a bit of sort of theatre tourism. Have you seen then the influence of that exposure occur on stages in Ireland? Like, have you seen shifts in paradigms of design? Because I think sometimes we could be critiqued maybe throughout the 20th century for, and I could be totally wrong on this, but being somewhat, you know, there was always that the other PQ in Ireland is at the peasant quality. You know, there's that obsession with the old kitchen sink and the cottage fireplace or whatever on the stages. And in a way feeling very un-European and uncool, you know. And then I kind of think of like going off to European arts festivals going, whoa. So have you seen that kind of the beginnings of that engagement kind of shift the realms of possibility, give greater confidence or things like that?
Well, yeah, well, I mean, we didn't, you know, Irish theatre didn't really need PQ in order to demonstrate, you know, a kind of really expanded sensibility around its theatre practice. I mean, particularly during the 90s, there was just so much more dissemination around visual theatre practice. I mean, I remember, and actually without wanting to get sort of anecdotal about it, when I went to college to study theatre design, if you went to the library to look for images of past theatre practice, I remember there was a big book of Soviet theatre design, which I couldn't make head or tail of at the time. And that was about it. And there was very little that was being written about the nature of scenography, and there was very little that was kind of enabling you to have a look at images. And it's obviously pre-internet and all the rest of it. And in the 90s in particular, that just completely changed. And there were a couple of really important books that came out at that time, and there was some really important efforts that you know, different individuals made around disseminating visual theatre practice. And I think Ireland benefited from that as much as any other country did. So we didn't really need Prague to do that. I mean, you think of some of the designers that were kind of practicing in and around Dublin in the 90s, you know, the likes of Monica Frawley and Joe Vanek and others who were kind of supremely gifted designers, and stand up, you know, against anybody during that period, I think.
Could I ask then, what was it about the 90s, do you think, that caused the surge? Is it just a general Celtic tigerness and everything's changed, or was it, you know, was there a lot of groundwork in the 80s that then sort of enabled a kind of a huge rejuvenation of practice or something in the 90s?
Well, I think, and let me see if I can just sort of speculate on that, because I don't know if I can actually give you the answer. But I mean, if you look at a designer like Monica Frawley, who I think was an extraordinary designer, and really well traveled. You know, there was a really kind of internationalized experience about her and a very kind of international eye about what she did. So I think, I mean, straightforwardly, people were getting out and about, but there was a flush of books as well, which made it possible to kind of share images and understand what people were up to. Not necessarily books now sort of generated in this country, but just a lot of very good publishing that allowed you to see how different people were thinking about different kinds of theatrical visuality. And some of those, in fairness, were coming out of the Prague experience, because one of the beautiful things that certainly used to be the case with Prague was just the volume of great publishing that went with it. You know, there was always a knockout bookshop at Prague where you could spend whatever money you had and kind of top up on, you know, whatever was to be had. So I suspect that was part of it.
Yeah, it's interesting because we kind of take for granted how you can just Google stuff, you know, if you want to see images. Or, I mean, I remember in the 90s, my school teacher rolling in a huge computer, like on a tray with wheels, and explaining the internet was something the Americans had invented. And we were all going to have to try and deal with it. That's really interesting. Thanks, Liam.
Do you think, Miriam and Liam, the primacy of the playwright was just starting to come down in the 90s, and the other aspects of theatre production were coming up to meet it? Maybe that was part of it. I know through my own personal experience, throughout the 90s, I was living in the Netherlands and working in the Netherlands with Marina Abramovic, amongst others. So when I came back to Belfast in 93, I think it was, 2003, I couldn't quite understand. Yes, Liam, that 3-week, 4-week turnaround, I couldn't understand it. I couldn't understand why it was so fast. And you mentioned the kitchen sink, Miriam. If I had to design another play with a sofa, I was going to go crazy. I had the keys to the main independent company warehouse of set storage just outside Belfast. And I think at one point I had 7 sofas, 7 different sofas. And my European instinct was to throw all the sofas on stage, you know, and make the play from improvising with the sofas. That was my instinct, rather than just another play with the sofa and another play with the sofa. And it drove me mad. It drove me mad. And I was very used to the 6 month to 8 to 9 month to even a year process of working on a production. Now, not continually, like we'd come to it, workshop it, go away. I'd come up with some designs, come back, workshop those designs, go away, build some set, come to it. You know, that was what I was used to. And I think maybe that was what was starting to disagree with me, Liam, maybe, but maybe you're right. We had all traveled. I had traveled. And I was bringing that practice back and bringing what I saw back to Ireland. And I would say maybe Northern Ireland. I'm in Belfast right now. Maybe Northern Ireland was slightly behind Dublin, probably as well.
I mean, I think that's a really interesting point, and you're absolutely right in that there has been, particularly probably since the 90s, a new flavour of scenographer who is the kind of self-starter, you know, and they're kind of closer to a kind of fine artist model of practice than to, you know, a kind of older school theatre designer model of practice. For me, I've always, one of the things I really enjoy and one of the things I really find interesting is our proximity to literature as theatre designers. You know, it's it's unique in that sense, in that we do work so closely with writers. Often they're dead, in fairness, but we still try and work closely with with whatever their original intention was or whatever their thinking was. So
yeah, and that's
I don't
really
know that
because even like in terms of teaching, you know, your Irish drama module, for example, it was like the first time that I had worked so closely with text in ages, actually, is when I joined a program that was all about theatre design. Mm-hmm. So that's really interesting. But yeah, just to pass it back over, I don't know if you think it is what, you know, that idea of the writer. I think that's something we kind of position Ireland as kind of a writer's theatre, but maybe that's too easy. And we think that's why scenography was neglected. Is that too easy a way of looking at it?
Well, I mean, I certainly think that writers think differently about visuality, or I think they do. I think you could stand that up, and I think that writers feel much less restricted about the things they ask for than they might have at one time. I mean, I'd love somebody to give me a play that just required a sync, actually, because everything I seem to get at the moment requires you to be here, there, and everywhere. You know, and writers kind of refuse to settle down into a single space anymore. They want to take you around the world and back. But I do, you know, I think again, Arnold Aronson's really good on this, about the changing nature of scenography and the fact that there is this kind of this really interesting division around, you know, a school of practice which is very deeply embedded in the literary, and a school of practice which isn't. And one of the beautiful things about Prague is that actually both those communities and lots of others all arrive at the same place at the same time every 4 years. It's an interesting way of reviewing that and kind of thinking about it.
I think Sinead was going to ask something there.
Yeah.
No, I was just going to say that, like, I know in the 90s when I was looking at going to college, I originally wanted to be a stage manager because of some work experience I did in TY or something, and I kind of liked the look of stage management. But, you know, there was no education in design or anything to do with anything backstage in Ireland in the 90s and in the early noughties. You know, it didn't exist on an education level either, so young people didn't even know it existed. All they knew was the musicals and the, you know, plays that they might have been in at school or whatever. So I, you know, looked at England. So it was England and Scotland. Now, unfortunately, I picked the wrong college to apply for because it was the most popular one and I didn't get in, you know. So because I didn't have GCSE drama, but like, so the education system wasn't there either, you know, for design, you know. I think that could be another attribution to it, you know. It wasn't sort of, it was a drama degree in Trinity and film and television studies in Galway. I think that was about it, you know.
Yeah. And actually all those countries with a long and successful experience of Prague, there's always a strong educational dimension, and which kind of makes it infrastructurally possible. You know, it gives you a certain amount of kind of people power to make the thing happen. You know, education tends to provide a space where people can gather and talk about these kinds of things, when it's very difficult to do that professionally. And I think that fact, particularly higher education in the territories we're in, you often get lots of people with a foot in both camps. You know, they're both in practice and in education, and that tends to facilitate, you know, getting out and doing the big exhibition very often.
Yeah, I teach for a week every February in Bratislava in Slovakia, in the VSMU, their Performing Arts College. And generally their first years that I teach have done 4 years in a lycée or a fine art secondary school. So they divide their secondary schools into kind of 3 or 4 areas. And the standard of drawing, I come back to your idea about drawing, Liam, the standard of drawing is, for the first year, it's exceptional. It's absolutely exceptional, because they've done 4 years of art design already, but by the time they get to me.
Yeah. But that is still true of those colleges. I mean, they won't let you within 100 yards of the place unless you're a really good draftsman.
Yeah. So Liam, does Miriam want to come in again?
Yeah, but unless I'm being annoying and I can...
No.
Yeah.
Never.
Well, just, I suppose this is my own kind of naivety, because I've never gone to the PQ yet, but I would love to go. But you're right, it is about infrastructure and resources and timing and all the rest. How long does it take, if you know PQ's on in 2023, when does like the Irish team start to prep? Like sort of like you're going to the Olympics, like what's day one really of
3 years.
Advance?
3 years.
And I suppose I'd be interested in knowing, how does that happen? Like, how do people get selected or invited to contribute, or what are the sort of parameters? And then I've kind of a second question. If that, when you get to PQ, it's different countries contributing, does it become inherently sort of nationalistic in a way?
That's a great question, Miriam. Yeah.
Well, I think there's 2 questions there, but to answer the first question, I mean, Liam, you probably speak better to this than me, but I think the first time, well, ITI, Irish Theatre Institute, were involved before ISSD or ISPD.
Yeah, to give a bit of context, the first time that we ever participated was 2007. So it could be interesting to think about, you know, what happened then in relation to development of education and infrastructure. But then ISD was only established in 2019,
16 or 15? 16, wasn't it?
Yeah, 16, in response to...
I need to check my diary. I can't remember.
You know what I think happened?
Well, I joined in 2016. I know I joined in 2016.
Okay, yeah.
So maybe you had been before that, but...
Yeah. So yeah, continue. So we've 2007,
no, just saying, so,
and then we're out for a year, and then we're back again in 2019 due to the society being established in 2016.
Yeah, but from the first meeting I attended in 2016, we were already talking about PQ.
Yeah.
And I think there was a subcommittee formed with the 2 people you mentioned on it, although they couldn't hang around. I think yourself, Liam, IADT, and ourselves in Sligo kind of pushed the student thing, as you know, across the country access. And I'll come back to that later. But the way it was selected was there was a national call out to all members of ISSSD, north and south, because it's an island-wide organization, as it should be. And we had a national exhibition in the January, and we had appointed the curator. I think that was through a call out as well, wasn't it, Liam?
Yeah.
And from the national exhibition, that curator decided that there was going to be 7 or 8 artists who would be selected from the National Exhibition to be part of the National Exhibition in Prague. And then that became a virtual reality exhibition, which was wonderful. And then we brought that exhibition back and toured it to the Dublin Theatre Festival, Belfast International Arts Festival, to the Everyman in Cork, and then to Sligo as well. So that was a kind of selection here, going there with what was selected from the, from that selection, and then bringing what was there back and then touring it again. This time it was slightly different. There was a call out for a concept, and that concept would result in an exhibition in Prague. And then that exhibition would then come back and tour. And that Tom Creed, who's the chosen curator, called out to all our members of ISPD, and everyone submitted something, and then he interviewed them, and then that's how he selected the final. Again, I think it's 7 or 8 artists that were around the table. So that's the process. So it's been slightly different. And then I think ITI was slightly different before, wasn't it, Liam? They did something slightly different with Leon Bell, was it?
Yeah, that was so. The 2007 show was John Comiskey and Leanne Bell put it together, and in a way that was the most kind of formally a kind of retrospective of a body of work, and it kind of gathered together models and drawings, and I think there was a certain amount of video and so on. So it was an exhibition of work that had been achieved on the island, and there's clearly there's different kind of curatorial positions that we can take on this thing, and those positions in and of themselves are quite revealing about what we think theatre is or might be or ought to be at any particular time. Some countries, when you go, what you'll see is some countries, it is very straightforward, a retrospective of whatever they might think to be the most interesting work of the last 4 years. Other countries, it might be an event or an incitement, or in the case of the Irish show this time, a kind of a discussion, sort of perspective discussion about practice. So the form of the thing has kind of changed from something which is fairly straightforwardly a kind of material retrospective of work to something which can be, if you want it to be, a little bit more exploratory, I suppose.
Yeah, and I think that happened with the change of name in 2011. So it was the Prague Quadrennial of theatre architecture, I think. I think it was something like that. And then it changed to of performance design and space. And that's when Sadja Lotker took over. And I think the kind of approach then in 2011, from 2011 and 2015 changed to kind of more of a responsiveness. Like in 2015, it was a responsiveness to Prague itself. I think the theme was music, weather, politics. And that was the year where I was involved. And that was, we talked about this before, that was Mart, and it was more like an art project, more of an installation. But then the kind of documentary was the designers' voices. And that was particularly because I think some of the designers, their noses were a little bit out of joint, that, Ireland was being represented at the largest international festival of scenography by people who weren't working in Irish scenography or theatre design necessarily. So the documentary was kind of it was kind of an addition to that. Myself and Noelia Ruiz created it to include designers' voices. And then we have 2016 with the establishment then of the organization, which I think is interesting. Do you think part of the reason why you were involved, you co-founded it, was it to kind of galvanize kind of theatre designers together so that we could represent ourselves internationally, or was that part of the impetus?
No, it was absolutely that. I mean, Prague is the kind of prize for membership or for the organisation and its membership. Prague is the kind of prize because, most designers would kind of, a lot of them anyway, kind of give their eye teeth to be part of PQ and to be kind of out there representing their practice. So certainly putting the society together in the first place, it was absolutely clear to everybody who worked in theatre that if you had some sort of ongoing discourse about the practice, then suddenly all sorts of things become possible. And that's the big trick to it, really, is to try and have some kind of legacy infrastructure which you can kind of build on incrementally, a little bit, so that every time that 4 years comes around, you've got something pretty substantial that you could put out there in the world. Yeah, so that was absolutely part of the thinking.
Yeah, I might move on to Niall, if that's okay, unless there's anything else you're dying to add, Liam.
No, I'm done.
That was great, though, and great to have all that kind of context. So we have, and it's taken us up quite usefully to 2019, where we have what is now ISPD presenting for the first time at PQ, and that's the first time you were involved, Niall, wasn't it?
Yeah, so I joined the society not long after it was formed. I had just gotten the job in Sligo, and I realized that I really wanted to be a person from Belfast joining, and I was encouraging my fellow Belfast or Northern Irish in general people to join as well. And Kieran Bagnall, quite a well-known designer over the whole island, I persuaded him to join, and a few other people. And I think since 2018, I've been the education officer because I'm a lecturer. And at the time, Liam was the chair or the president. And I volunteered to be the education officer. And a part of the duty of being the education officer is stepping into that curatorial role for the PQ student exhibition, which I co-curated in 2019 with Liam himself. And but it was just students from IADT and students from Sligo that attended. And yeah, it all went well. I was one of the chosen artists in the national exhibition, so I was running crazily around from one to the other and one to the other. And but Prague is crazy anyway. You're always running around and you're always spending too much energy going everywhere. The only good thing about it is it's still very cheap. So you can run around and do lots of stuff, and it isn't that expensive. So for 2023, obviously we started planning during the pandemic, and we got the theme given to us, I think 18 months or 2 years beforehand. And the theme we were given was rare. And that was a really interesting theme for Ireland, I think, because it was, what is rare about your culture? What is rare about your society? What is rare about your country at the minute? And that is the theme you base your work around. And I knew that I wanted to do more than just the access between Dún Laoghaire and Sligo, that they're the two main performance design colleges. I wanted to include as many people as possible from the whole island. In the same way that the reason I joined ISSD was at the time was to include the North and to make it a whole island body. And so I wrote quite early on to, I think, 23 theatre courses or drama courses all over the island of Ireland at various levels, institutes, universities, in, every single place I could think of. So Bangor in Northern Ireland, Belfast, Derry, Sligo, Galway, Limerick, Carlow. I'm trying to go through the map in my head. Couple in Cork, Waterford, and then the East Coast. I went Dundalk. I went to Inchicore, Griffith, Trinity, UCD, IADT, and the Lear. I went everywhere. I went to as many people as I could. I said, okay, this is what this is what PQ is. Would your students like to get involved in 2 years' time? The response was kind of, yeah. I have to be honest.
Okay.
I think maybe 6 people emailed me back out of all those emails that I sent out.
I think it's not on people's radar, PQ.
No. I tried to make my email as exciting as possible, but I know lecturers are busy.
When you catch the bug and you've been there, it's kind of like, this is actually really important and special and a really good experience. I think if they haven't been there, it's not on their radar, they don't see the benefit. Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And
It's always about the money.
So yeah, but it's the same. You know, I know Liam did as well in 2019. We paid for things out of our own pockets in 2019. I paid for stuff out of my own pocket this time as well. The students fund themselves. The students, get the cheap airline, Ryanair, and they get a cheap hostel room with 6 beds in it. This time, however, we had I think triple the funding from the Arts Council and Culture Ireland compared to 2019. And so the producers I think very sensibly decided to give a portion of that money to the students, not to the student exhibit, but to the students, to fund their flights and accommodation. I think there were 10 bursaries awarded, and they also paid people who invigilated as well, because the idea was that there was always a student at the National Exhibition, just as almost like an assistant stage manager, just to be there, and they all got paid as well. So that was great. That was a fantastic thing to happen, that there was a real integration between the National Exhibition and the students' voice was heard because they were at the table. They had a seat at the table. That famous phrase from that African American woman in America, I forget who it is, but I know that phrase. If there's not a seat at the table, you pull up a seat, you put it, and you sit at the table. So just to go back to how we treated the theme rare. So I had the starting idea in my head that I wanted as many colleges involved as possible, and I definitely wanted people from Northern Ireland to be involved. And Esme and Lucy are here, which is fantastic, from Queen's, my alma mater. And the various some lecturers go back to me and said, listen, the students really are busy, or they can't afford, because I was trying to do the workshops. So I came up with a concept, and we decided to do workshops in the spring with the students to get them to meet each other and to play with design, and then encourage them, show them videos of previous PQ and encourage them to go. So the idea of the rare, and I thought, what is rare? What is rare for us? And I hope the students will agree. For me, as a Belfast man who grew up in the 80s in Belfast, in the Troubles, what is rare is 25 years of the peace process on the island of Ireland, and celebrating the Good Friday Agreement. That was what the starting point was for my thoughts on the exhibition. That is a unique model that has been adopted diplomatically internationally. The way those problems were solved, and the great play by Owen McCafferty, Agreement, which was on at the Lyric, I don't know if anyone saw it, was fantastic. The negotiations, the personalities, and the way to cut through all that. I mean, the great Mo Molam is staged magnificently in that play. So for me, celebrating 25 years of the Good Friday Agreement was really important, because I think it was important for the whole island. It's not just a Northern Ireland issue. It was important for the whole island, so 1990, and it's funny enough, in 2028, it'll be 30 years, and Dublin and Belfast will be together again celebrating football, which is kind of exciting for the Euros 2028. But that 25th anniversary, and I was also thinking, and the students actually led me in this, what also has happened uniquely in those 25 years since the peace process, and the referendums on marriage equality and on the clause in the Constitution banning abortion were quite resonant with the students as well. And also, queer, I write a lot of queer theory, and, as a gay man, I was quite keen to celebrate that vote for marriage equality, the first vote for equality by referendum in the world. And was it 2016 as well, or 2017? I can't remember. But I wanted to celebrate that. So I don't know if you could, Siobhán, share an image for me?
Yeah. I'm pretty sure that was 2017.
2017. It was around
then, yeah.
So the first image is the image at the top of the document. And this is 1969 on the Falls Road in Belfast. So this is more than a year before PQ, I have to send a working document of what the concept is. And I called the concept Beyond the Barricades, a rare story of a unique island. And the reason I called it Beyond the Barricades is there was a very famous album, I think my parents had it, called Behind the Barricades. You know, what culturally and musically is going on behind the barricades.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, okay, what can we do? Let's go beyond the barricades. But, you know, this was way before Russia invaded Ukraine. And way before, you know, obviously before what's just happening at the minute in the Middle East. But this is 1969 on the Falls Road. And this young father is trying to negotiate to get his baby from one side of the barricade to the other with a British soldier. And I'm really interested in the graphic nature of this barricade and these angles. And it's a really, you know, photographically, it's an indelible image of the Troubles in Northern Ireland, in Belfast. And that I remember this when I was a young kid. I remember looking at this. I remember looking at those soldiers, and the young people that were with me in Prague would never remember anything like this. This looks alien to them, I'm sure. And that's 25 years of the peace process since the Good Friday Agreement. And if we move on to the second image, in the middle of the document, there's several reasons for this. Excuse my drawing skills. I had to do something really graphic and simple and kind of technical for the technicians and the architects in PQ. My idea was that we make a barricade, but it's a barricade of color. When we painted these are bits of timber with metal struts, kind of metal hit kind of joints that are the timber just slots into. And I chose the colors of the pride flag deliberately because of the 2017 referendum on marriage equality. And there was definitely quite a number of queer identifying students who came over out of the 21. And the rest were probably allies, I'm pretty sure. So the pride flag was really important to me. And the idea was that we take students from all the institutes that I could, from the Republic and the North, and celebrate this idea. I'm going to read a little bit from what I sent to Prague committee. What I wrote was, following 30 years of brutal and bloody conflict, great steps have been taken to establish a peace process which has resulted in a quarter century of stability and prosperity for the whole island of Ireland. But alongside this, a cultural renaissance has taken place across, through, and sometimes in opposition to the border between the two states. I would say that co-productions and theatrical experimentations by artists working together from both sides of the border have now become commonplace. Indeed, the border itself, at once tangible and problematic, but also liminal, imaginary, and steeped in history, has often been used as the subject matter for these productions. So that was the idea behind what I was trying to do here. And what I proposed was, instead of a barricade of separation and violence and conflict, was that we make a barricade of color, of play, and of cultural examination, where, and I'm quoting again from the document I sent, where students reform and perform with the design over the period of the exhibition. And I imagine different groups coming for a few days and overlapping with other groups, where they dismantle and rebuild the barricade for their performative interventions and their collaborations every day. Yeah. And this was exactly what happened. The students came, and you can stop sharing there, Siobhán. And this was exactly what happened. The students played together in workshops in Sligo and in Dublin, and played with ideas before we went there. So they all had an idea in their head of the elements that they could bring to, and they traveled with costume, they traveled with materials, they traveled with music, they traveled with scripts, they traveled with ideas, because they had the workshops in the spring. And yes, Siobhán's right. Sinead's right. There were 21 students from 5 different institutions, including the North. And it was really exciting it was difficult, and thank you, Sinead, for doing this, for timetabling. Sinead was the timetabling person with the students. The students kind of, Sinead gave them a document, and they kind of slotted themselves in, and then Sinead sorted it all right. But basically the idea was, well, I'm kind of annoyed with PQ, by the way, because the national exhibition was from 9 to 6, but they asked that the students go to 8 o'clock. So I was like, but the poor students, you know, they've been there all day, but why are you making them do an extra 2 hours for free when
And
probably
also,
the national exhibition people are getting paid, you know?
and it was roasting as well. So they're there.
And it was boiling or pouring with rain a couple of days.
Yeah. And then they didn't give them an indoor space. They were all out in the baking heat, all the students.
Yeah.
So it was a little bit.
Yeah. That's one of the reasons I asked for the tree, was because I knew it might be hot. And we were the only ones who were given a tree. I think I was the only one who asked for a tree. Although they did plonk Brazil right in front of us, which was huge, which was kind of annoying. But
you were
anyway.
kind of hidden behind the tree. Yeah.
We were kind of hidden. You had to discover us behind the tree. Anyway, so we had to divide the day into 3 because of that 8 o'clock section that we had to go to. And basically we put, each student had, remind me, Sinead, was it 2 times or 3 times? Some had 3 because they were staying longer. So each student had 2 or 3 sessions where they were in charge. Was that right, Sinead?
Yeah, so there was three sessions per day, 4 students per session. I don't know, some of them ended up doing a few extras as well, depending on who was there and for how long. And
and you know, you all kind of knitted together very quickly, didn't you, Lucy?
Yeah, no, we kind of like talked amongst ourselves and like just accommodating like arrival and like departure dates. We just wanted to make sure that, like you said, like, because if it was hot on one day, that like someone wasn't out there too long, or you know, like just kind of share it amongst us. But it worked out really well.
Yeah, and everyone had a different approach. Everyone had something else they wanted to explore. You know, was it a text-based intervention? Was it a music-based intervention? Was it an intervention based on costume? Were we manipulating the materials continually? Were we playing games with the other students from other national exhibitions? Were we playing games with the public? There were all those possibilities because it was never fixed. It was always mutable. It was always changeable. The other thing I'd just like to highlight is I tried to be as sustainable as possible.
Can I just bring Miriam in because she might have to go? And then
okay, Miriam.
Sustainability, yeah.
I hopefully don't. I seem to have quietness out there, but no, it's just for Sinead. I think Sinead has a few images she could share with us now. I just made her a co-host there.
Oh, great.
Does that timing work? If we do that now?
Go for it.
Just while Niall's talking, it might be an idea to just show you some pictures as well, do you know?
Yeah.
Sorry, continue, Niall.
So in terms of sustainability, well, you can see we kind of made it. It's kind of slightly obfuscated, but we did build, when we arrived, Sinead and I built a 25. Don't know if you can see that, for the 25th anniversary of the Good Friday Agreement. And then all the other pieces were kind of developed around that. We kind of liked the tree in terms of a queer holy tree, you know, like or a holy well tree, like the one that's on the Angelus, which actually is just outside Sligo. You know, that idea of tying a piece of ribbon or cloth or a memento into a tree that's sacred. You can see that it got dark at night because we were on till 8 as well. One kind of trope or costume element that became really important and was really visually striking was the gag or the blindfold. Some people from IADT arrived. You can see on the very far right of that image with this blindfold with sewn eyes on it, and the idea of what you cannot say because you're not allowed to, and what you cannot see because you're not allowed to, in terms of the conflict, became a really important trope that came back again and again. And the idea of repetitive processes. So you can see the person at the front of that image knitting. The idea of crocheting, the idea of gameplay became quite important. And then just to talk about sustainability. So all those metal junctions were used to construct the framework of the piece for the students in 2019. I have a good friend who's a very talented metal fabricator, and he did them all at cost price. They would have cost thousands, but I think I paid him £360 sterling for them. So I own them personally, and I thought, right, you know what? I'm keeping these. I'm not leaving them in Prague. And I wanted to be green. I didn't want to just, abandon scenography set pieces. And I know that we're all thinking about that, definitely in the society. So I brought them back to Sligo, and then I based my concept drawing, which I showed you earlier, knowing on the fact that I had these steel junctions and how they could be played with. So myself and students in Sligo, we cut these pieces of timber and painted them and played with them in Sligo and in the Lear in Dublin. And they even like made costumes out of them, like people wore them at some points as well, like constructed them around their bodies. Everything, this time we brought everything back as well, because this time there was a van going with the National Exhibition and a van coming back from Prague with the National Exhibition. So this time we were able to put all of this in with the National Exhibition van and bring it back. And then my car, fortunately, is big enough to take the whole thing back to Sligo. So they're now all back in Sligo, and they're being used again. So we were trying to teach sustainability in the university in Sligo as well. So we're trying to persuade our students to, yes, come up with a concept design for whatever they're doing, but to then try and solve it using pieces that exist within the theatre building. There's quite a few students in this photo from other countries as well, actually, there, which was always really interesting. The other thing we did, which was quite exciting, is we organized the first ever PQ Pride March. There's never been one, even though it's in June every year. There's never been a Pride March at PQ. So with our co-host Germany, the German student exhibition and the Irish student exhibition held a Pride parade around the whole of the PQ exhibition on the first Friday afternoon, which was fantastic. I don't know if there's any photos of that, are there, Sinead?
There is. I'm just trying to find them. There's that many pictures.
Which was really exciting. And then the Germans had a techno disco as their student exhibition. So yeah, we built a big heart out of the pieces in the Pride colours, and we toured through the whole exhibition. This is through the central hall, with many countries following us as well. It was very exciting.
It's really interesting, the materiality of it and the simplicity of it, and the kind of focus on ritual as well.
Yeah.
And I found that striking at PQ overall. You know, if we compare post-pandemic PQ 2023 to PQ 19, 19 was very much like lots and lots of digital stuff, you know, lots of immersive kind of VR, all that kind of stuff, but it felt really stripped back in general, PQ, the approach, you know, and I'm wondering about that in terms of sustainability as well. And, you know, now that we're kind of more aware of digital hygiene, I suppose, and the role of tech, I guess, in environmental issues. So I think that's really
there were many exhibitions that talked about their sustainability. There were many exhibitions. I think
kind of feels like we're in a arts and crafts movement 2.0, if you know what I mean, following the digital revolution of the pandemic. It's kind of like now we're coming out, and there was lots of craft, like lots of making, knitting, tying things, you know, that kind of back to that's kind of.
I would highlight Catalonia, where those two things kind of came together. Catalonia's exhibition, which I think won one of the junior prizes,
that was the white one.
Catalonia was mostly on ground level, and it was a tour through the next like 20,000 years on what's happening to the human race and how humans and bacteria interact. And it was like deterioration of human items, like imagining what would happen to a human piece of clothing in 100 years, in 200 years, in 1,000 years, in 5,000 years, in 20,000 years. And they would just have these piles, and someone had fungus growing on them, or they'd made or painted, but there were little dates as you wandered around, and you had headphones, and you had a QR code with the date, and that would relate to your headphones to the story of what is happening with this artifact in 5,000 years. It was really interesting, where the digital and the kind of ecological, practical stuff on the ground combined completely. There was one interesting group, Latvia, who I became great. There's always a symposium or conference a year before, which I was lucky enough to go to as the education officer in June 2022. And I became great friends with the Latvian group. And their presentation was that they weren't going to fly from, is it Riga, the capital of Latvia? Is it Riga? Yeah. They weren't going to fly from Riga to Prague. They were going to take a hybrid car and be as minimal in terms of their impact to the planet as possible. And they weren't going to spend any money on materials. They weren't actually going to exhibit anything at Prague. What they did was they had a live video stream every day for the 12 or 13 days of their journey from Riga to Prague, very slowly. And their performative and design interventions to the spaces they traveled through every day. You could go and see the small screen. It was about this big, and every day you could go and see what they were doing at that point in that day. And then once that day was finished, the day would kind of become like a slideshow of the most wonderful design moments or the most wonderful photos of that day. My favorite day was when they were in an abandoned factory. There was lots of broken stained glass, and they did a whole installation of backlit design, and it was just the stuff they find lying on the floor. It was almost like a Andy Goldsworthy, intervention in nature, but it was an intervention in industrial waste. So this pattern making and this human intervention, but with zero impact. Indeed, they probably picked up all the plastic that they could as they went, and I'm not saying I'm not sure if they did, but it sounds like something, because I know them, it sounds like something they do, that they probably pick up every bit of plastic they did and recycle it. But that was one of my favorite interventions as well. They're making a film of it, and I've asked them to contact us and engage with ISPD in terms of showing the film.
Oh, that would be great.
And I'm sure we could share that with ISTR as well.
That'd be fantastic.
I'm aware it's 7:10, and I'm wondering if the students might want to.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Or if you might want to ask the students anything, Siobhán.
Yeah. So, I mean, what was really interesting as well is that we, it's interesting because we have the All Ireland approach in the student exhibition, and some people commented that Northern Ireland were left out of the UK exhibition, which was Hello Strange.
That was deliberate. That was deliberate. So in June in 2022, the two lovely women who were organising the UK national exhibition came over and chatted to me and said, "Listen, do you want Northern Ireland to be involved? Do you want, we don't want to." And I was like, "Listen, don't worry about it. If a certain designer in the north wants to join the UK, the British Society of Stage Designers, that's fine. They can do that. But generally, as with as with ISTR, the format that we're in tonight, as with the Irish Times Theatre Awards, as with many cultural bodies across the island, it's an island-wide institution. But what they did do, which was quite exciting, was the compromise that we came up with was that our students from Northern Ireland and from the Republic of Ireland would overtake the UK National Exhibition for one day. which was kind of exciting. So
Yeah.
for
Well,
one day in the UK,
just
it
to
was
put
Ireland.
a bit of context on it, that was the whole UK exhibit, though, wasn't it? It was
Yeah.
Hello Stranger. They were
Yeah.
inviting anyone to come and invade them. You know, that was, but that was part of it, and it was a beautiful performance. Actually, I was very lucky to witness some of it. So, you know, and it just really well put together. You know, well curated by yourself, Niall. But I think the students got an awful lot out of it too. Might be time to bring some of you in if you'd like to jump in and talk about your experience in general, or that particular day, because I thought that was really special. Lucy, or Jane, or Em, or Anna, or Esme.
Yeah, I thought it was like, I think invading the UK space was a really sort of interesting day. I think we sort of spoke about this sort of reverse colonialism of it, of kind of us coming in. I think as well as that, like, obviously I'm from England originally, but I lived in the North Island for a good few years now and stuff. And I think it was, quite important as part of that kind of Northern Irish identity to be have a space in the UK as well as a space in the All of Ireland, because, you know, there's a lot of people in Northern Ireland who would say consider themselves British, a lot that would consider themselves Irish. So it was good to kind of get to interact with kind of both spaces as part of kind of representing Northern Ireland.
Brilliant. Anybody else want to come in?
Yeah, I'll just say for the same for myself, like, especially because whenever I didn't know a lot about PQ whenever we started with it, and like I think we like learned as we went along, but like even to start with, I was not confused, but I was like, okay, but what team is this for? Because in my head I was like, oh, is the UK reaching out or is it Ireland reaching out? But I think as well, like so much of our like anything that was done performance wise, it was all kind of based off of togetherness, and like I think that really represented itself within like even all the students, like, you know, making these quick like sometimes improvised like sort of performances with like other countries, but it was really special to let it just be what it is without like trying to, you know, control every single part of it.
I think Miriam wanted to jump in. Thanks a million.
You know I do. Well, it's more, I'm going to be really annoying now. It's more of a comment than a question. I'm going to be one of those people. But just to say, I don't think you can underestimate how important it is taking an all-island approach to anything. And that's not to be exclusionary or not to acknowledge the multitude of identities that are very valid and coexist in Northern Ireland. But it is to acknowledge the lack of all-island activity that's happened for a long time. And I know of my generation, you know, we grew up with Northern Ireland not really being mentioned because there was such a fear of contagion, you know. And it was only when I went to Queen's as well as an undergrad, I was 17, and it was only from living there as a student realizing what on earth happened. I never, like, you know, I'll never fully understand it. I didn't have to live through it. But realizing the magnitude of it, beginning to realize the magnitude of it and the intergenerational impact of it. And even now that things are different and in many ways still problematic, you know, I was at some talk recently and like there's these really sad statistics about how there is more integration between people in the south of Ireland and, you know, the UK and Poland and different parts of Europe than there is with people in the south and people in the north. So psychologically, somewhere that border has become really entrenched. And I don't know that it's necessarily a conscious thing. Like a lot of my friends from the south, the first time they ever went to, you know, over the border was to visit me at college because I went to Belfast. And the only reason I went to Belfast is because you couldn't really get a drama degree in the south, you know, and thank God, otherwise I wouldn't have gone north. So taking that all-island approach, you know, it's nice, it's interesting. It's also actually quite revolutionary and something that other generations would be very cautious of doing. So I just wanted to say bravo. And looking at those images and thinking about 25 years and the 25 pieces and putting them together and reimagining them, you know, it's quite moving. So yeah, I'll just say well done. And
thanks, Miriam. Thanks, Miriam. Sarah has her hand.
I do. I love the interactivity of it, of course. But actually, I was really a question for the students primarily, which is how did the traces of this experience find their way into your other projects or other research or the careers that you want to have in the future?
Great question.
Well, actually, sorry, you are here, okay? Sorry, I'm still in the gallery, but I think for me specifically, I found the experience of being at PQ very enlightening for my studies, because at the minute I'm currently doing my thesis on performance art spaces and theatrical spaces, how different spaces influence performance in that way. And I think the fact that the student was so removed from the national exhibition, but then we got the chance to go in and invade the UK and then see how that changed the way people interacted with us in that way. Very interesting. So I'm going into my major project. I'm going to be starting it. It's just, there's so many different like visual research, so much more information about other places that I have now that I can now take forward into whatever it is end up creating. So it's kind of how it's influenced me.
Good luck with the thesis.
That's brilliant. And M's thesis is being supervised by Luc Clement, actually, who had to leave early. Anybody else want to come in?
I can say that PQ definitely impacted the way I see like my practice right now, because I wouldn't be from a theatre background. I'm studying art, and I only recently got interested in performance art and that kind of thing. So then when I went to PQ, it really opened. I felt like an outsider at the beginning, like kind of looking into this magical world of theatre design and performance space design, and just looking in and being amazed, because I'd never properly considered what could be possible on a stage and what designers do. And I think it, like, design and art are thought so differently in a college level. So I think the way I approach like my assignments now, or like even when I think about any performances that I want to stage as a performance artist, I'm thinking about them in a more rounded way, because I've been exposed to looking at it from both a fine art perspective and also a theater design perspective. So I thought it was a really great opportunity, and yeah, it was really enlightening, and it really rounded me out, I think.
Brilliant, thanks, Anna. Anybody else want to come in? I think for you, yeah. Sorry.
I think, like, adding on to what Anna said, like my background, like I did drama and English at Queen's, like I was a lot more doing kind of just the theory of kind of like plays, dramaturgy, that sort of thing. We weren't looking big into scenography and that stuff. And I think doing PQ, it really taught me a lot about what scenography really is. I think, like, in the back of my head, as someone that's not from that background, I was kind of thinking, oh, okay, it's, you know, painting the stage and picking out the set pieces and all this. And I think I came to PQ and I was like, oh gosh, I'm so wrong. You know, kind of just how amazing the artistry is and kind of the individual artists within each kind of scenographer. And I think it's kind of a great experience for like all drama students, especially drama students who don't have as much access to learning more about the design side, to kind of get that perspective and learn about kind of the upcoming sort of going ons of what scenography is becoming.
I think it could be useful as well if more university lecturers, more drama lecturers got to PQ and realized the potentials of it, and that when they're teaching it, to yes, dramaturgy and yes, the writing is important, but let's look at the nuts and bolts of how to get something on stage. It's not lying here on the page. it's up on its feet and it's in space. And how do we deal with that?
Yeah. Yeah, sorry. Go on.
I'm not going to just add on to that as well, that first time I went to PQ was 2015, and I was just finished second year in undergrad, and I was I just went by myself, and getting that much exposure to such experimental theatre, especially when I live in Donegal, Northwest, I'm so cut off from everything. It was sort of life-changing in a sense. I think that's why I love PQ so much, that I keep going back. But as a second year student, then I remember just being so inspired by there was so much street performance as well, and it was on in different buildings all around the city. It seems to be different every time we go.
When was that, Sinead? Was that 2015?
2015, yeah. It was
2015 was brilliant, because it was like it was so hard to tell what's PQ and what's not PQ, but in a real interesting way. You're like, is that part of PQ or?
Yeah, had to look for the blue chair. Had to look for the blue chair that was outside each building. But there was stuff on the street, lots of performance on the streets, and whereas the last two PQs have been in a very sort of a zone that's away from the public. Only people that are going to the PQ will see anything that's happening at it. But this was very integrated into the city. It just made me rethink everything. Going straight into a module in performance art after that, I was ready, that sort of way. Whereas if I hadn't gone to PQ just before that, I probably wouldn't have been as ready for performance art, But anyway,
it was the...
Sorry, go on.
Go ahead, Sinead.
No, go on, you, yeah. All right.
I was just going to say there was one very interesting evening. I think it was the first Saturday night. They moved us to a new venue, which is the old city market, and I think there were the old meat packing halls. It was actually quite a good venue. I quite liked it.
Yeah, because the palace was being refurbished, so we were.
But we were right beside
we were mixed in with all of these markets, and then PQ layered on top of it.
Yeah. But there was one interesting evening because we're also very close to the football stadium, and there was a European Cup final, and West Ham from the east of London were playing the Prague team, and so all these drunk, very sweet, actually very nice West Ham football fans just suddenly appeared, mixing in with all these freaky, wonderful performance design students and actors, and they loved it. They loved the whole thing. It was very, very weird, but it was quite exciting, and there was no trouble at all.
During the Estonian fashion show, I believe. Do you remember the big fashion?
Yes, it was. It was during the fashion show.
Yeah. They were all lost. But
it's become very performative. It's become really performative, and it seems that the bits of the exhibition that attract the most attention are the costume fashion shows. Like they get the big crowds.
And the student exhibition, I think, is on par with the professional exhibition.
Absolutely.
There's so many of the students' exhibitions that are really high quality, so it's not that it looks studenty, or the professional countries look more professional than the students. I think they're kind of, sometimes the student exhibitions are better,
Agreed, yeah.
Which is really interesting,
I think we've managed to convince Miriam to go, which was the whole objective this evening. Is there anything else that we need to say before we finish up? Because we've 5 minutes left. So if there are any burning questions or comments.
Not a burning question, but
I would say is, sorry, go ahead, Miriam.
No, you go first, because mine is much more a concluding thing.
Okay.
Matter of
all
business.
I was going to say is, I'll put my email in the chat. If anyone wants to come the next time, I'm not sure if I have another curatorial kind of experience in me. At the minute, it looks like it is me, but I might persuade Sinead to take over from me. But you can email me if you're interested in going the next time. Just email me. Where is the chat? It's niall.rea@atu.ie.
Well, on that now, do you know what would be really interesting and helpful is if, like, the year in advance of going, if there's room for more student activity, if we can get you into drama departments to talk about it a year in
Absolutely,
advance.
absolutely.
What lectures
Well, no, I was trying to, I have to be honest, I was trying to do that. I was
Just-
trying to do that this time. Like, I did email about
Don't-
8 months in advance, but you know, it's
And
Yeah,
just
people
to
are just
say as
not.
well, just another way to put it on the radar is PQ has a whole online archive that people can use in their teaching, and there's loads and loads of videos available. And it looks, the videos make it look so exciting. So that's another, you know, draw if you kind of.
Well, I think everyone will decide it's a good idea if you go in and show it to them, but then you need 18 months because then the department will have to go and lobby for the money of the university to send the students.
Oh, listen, they won't give you money. They won't. They just won't. If it's well, I don't know about Galway. Maybe you have loads of money, but
No.
I actually no. I lie. In 2019, the department bought me a projector.
Yeah,
to take to Prague, but that was all they did.
You can lobby, you know, if it's a once-off and it's like this isn't every year, extraordinary expense, it's outside of the normal budgets, and then you know, then the university could plan to make the most of it, and then it can be included on a module, and you can link it to assessment, and then it's included in workload and not something put on them on top of their workload. But yeah, I think 18 months in advance, if you want to, if we hook up then, and you know, I can draft an email to all the lecturers I know, most of whom are on the ISTR committee, because it just sounds utterly fabulous.
Sure.
And
I might add the flights, the accommodation, when you're there, everything is so cheap, you know. It's really cheap to go and stay for 2 weeks.
It really did jump up between 2019 and 2023, but it is still quite
yeah. No, it's just planning, isn't it? But that sounds amazing.
Pints are €2.
No, well, we won't budget that.
No, it just meant that at the end of the day, I could take all the students.
He did
to the local bar and buy a round for all of them, just to say thank you. And
I
could afford to do it because they're only €2 a pint.
That's lovely. That's lovely. Before we wrap up, can I give a shout out to our next ISTR webinar? We've one more planned before Christmas. So for those of you who'd be interested in learning more about publishing, it's Dr. Helena Grehan. She's an Irish academic, but she's a professor of theatre in Murdoch University in Australia. And she's the editor of the Performance Research Journal, which is like a major international peer-reviewed journal online. And so she's going to do a Q&A with Dr. Siobhán Hill, who is of Queen's University. Yeah, and it's about publishing and how to publish in a journal, and you know, special issues and ways to prepare your publication, and just how to get you going. So that will take place on the 8th of November at 1 p.m. It'll also be recorded. It would be great to have people with us. So this has been a wonderful evening. Siobhán, I might hand back to you to say the final farewell and safe home and all.
You were the president, Miriam, but I'll say thanks so much to Niall, Liam and the students for being here. And yeah, it was great to kind of put scenography on the map, I suppose, in ISTR, and you know, for the first webinar, just to kind of, you know, to put PQ on people's radar as well, and to think about the importance of scenography as a practice of making and of performance and all of that, and how it intersects with performance art, and you know, the interdisciplinarity of it, the internationalness of it, and the, you know, the sustainable approaches we can take. And I'll hand over to the president for the final word.
The final word is, you know, good luck, have a lovely evening.
Good luck.
We're all having a glass of wine, a cup of tea. That was really informative as well as moving. And I'd love to see more images down the line if you have them, or if you can send on links to where we can look at it, would be great. Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.